delighted to be in Colombo among distinguished comrades, Your Excellency, Dr. Chandrasekhar. I just can't agree more on everything you have said. I would like to extend to you the fraternal greetings of the members of GRILA and CIRFA, and thank you for the honor of taking part to this important meeting. During these days, we will try to immunize ourselves against the virus of fascist, racist, and culturalist thought and neoliberal and imperialist practice by closing our ranks because its hegemony obscures and pollutes the horizon of the world and make us believe that we cannot act and that its order would be unsurpassable. It is difficult to counter the enemy of the world it imposes and open doors to hope. As Professor have expressed, the demand and the measures that arose from the non-aligned movement of Bandung constituted in the Cold War era a middle pathway of nationalism, defending independent development and democracy. There were clearly advancement of national bourgeois or petit bourgeois interests, and the essential elements are still important through considerably without breath. The plundering of the global South's resources to the benefit of mainly the North has destroyed development prospects for all our countries and generated pauperization, rarefaction, and destabilization. Since the rejection of the demand for a new international world order in 1973-74, and despite many initiatives, the country of the periphery has been exposed to the debt issue, the debt option, to compradorization, and then to the coercion of the neoliberal and financialized market. This considerably watered down the Bandung dream and accentuated the dispersal of the itineraries of social formation, which buried the potential for radicalism that could still exist, however, among the non-aligned, not only the states, but above all the struggles of peoples and nations. To overcome the difficulties of integration into the world economy, free trade agreements and all sorts of regional arrangements have been tried out in the global South, with very little internal South-South integration in reality. In the current state of disarray and expectation, and without nostalgia, a lucid response from the organic forces of the global South is inexorably becoming aware of its anti-systemic potential. This presupposes recovering the state's room for maneuver, rediscovering the organizational potential of peoples and the coherence of the convergence of transversal struggles beyond sovereignty against transnationals, war, and the rapacity of the market, and in defense of the equal status of women and the protection of the common good and the environment. This is not a time for nostalgia and mere commemoration, but for understanding that the non-alignment must have the courage to align themselves against imperialism and reinvent what I call a transinternationalism of peoples. If the latter accept the leadership of the industrial champions of the global South, mainly the BRICS, it rejects their sub-imperial temptation and reached out to the people of the core countries to also fight barbarism. I propose transinternationalism starting from the global South first, so that once it has crystallized and without sub-imperialism, it can irradiate the people of the North whose interests are not so opposed to ours, confronted as they are with the rigors of their uniformizing economic, cultural, educational, and political standards and system. Universality, however, will only exist with other homeomorphic and indigenous equivalent. Homeomorphic is just all the values that Panikar has expressed. Sometimes it's referred to religion, but we are looking on the other conception of human rights, other conception of development that may exist in India, China, or Africa. So this is the condition that would probably irrigate, and when hegemony fades through fertile and reciprocal acculturation. The Global South must also take back the epistemic initiative and restore the sense to participate in an uninhibited construction and a non-Eurocentric reconstruction of knowledge. We need to deconstruct the Eurocentrism embedded in our cognitive frames that are deeply enmeshed in our thoughts and practices of knowledge. This epistemic issue is eminently political. It is articulated in the effort at redeployment offered by transinternationalism. By transinternational, I mean the extra-state and national dimension, both infra- and supranational, which incorporates progressive internationalism, mainly those of workers and the jobless, ecologists and feminists. So we are going beyond the first internationalism and adapting it to the 21st century to its equivalent in different parts of the world in order to achieve real universalism. Transinternationalism makes it possible to incorporate internationalism, which itself went beyond the national question by advocating workers' solidarity, transcending it to deploy politically, socio-culturally, and psychologically a progressive rearguard and vanguard front of the organic forces to meet the challenge of the 21st century and beyond. Our struggle goes back a long way, and I think Professor have expressed how all these struggles were important. It started for us in the famous League of Anti-Imperialists that was in 1927 in the Congress of Berlin, and also to refer to that very noxious atmosphere of the Spanish War, which was very similar to the one we are enduring today, created chaos in the spirit of the return of the Brown Plague. 10 years after Bandung, more than 500,000 Indonesian allied to President Sukarno were exterminated for their real or presumed membership of the PKI, the Communist Party of Indonesia. Just a few months earlier, in 1965, Sukarno slammed the door on the UN in protest at Malaysia's entry into the Security Council and launched a new rising force, believing he could revive the Bandung momentum from the Hanoi, Phnom Penh, Beijing, Jakarta, Pyongyang springboard. Imperialism fanned the flames of hatred against the communists and plunged the country into pogrom by Muslim fundamentalists and conservatives under the so-called New Order, pale imitation of the Japanese imperial dictatorship. 10 years after Bandung, the country that hosted it sounded the death knell for the progressive Third World movement. The other issue that is still around, and it's a pity is coming back, is the issue of race. The prejudice about race and racial myths and about alleged backwardness and incompatibility with civilization, early denounced by Antenor Firmin, persist in coloniality that even today demands a change in our paradigms and power relations. This is exactly what Aníbal Quijano is expressing in the issue of coloniality. On the coloniality of power and the colonial modern matrix, he explained that this coloniality of power has proved to be more durable and more deeply rooted than the colonialism itself that it has engendered, and which it helped to impose globally. We have to question even the development issue. Development in German is Entwicklung. It is a Western belief. We have to look at something that I would call a more balanced dynamic and more equilibrium type of development. And it's important to reflect on how we can contribute to debunk and reinvent this issue of development. Everywhere, the struggle to preserve equality or to increase inequality continues. The balance of power is political, and depending on the worldview and the period, gives rises to increasingly sophisticated superstructures to resolve issues of wealth, power, and meaning. It is up to us, in the exceptional historic moment of redeployment of imperialism in the 21st century, to help complete the effort of so many people who have fought for our freedoms and our development. The leaders and forces of resistance in these countries were fighting for decolonization and against the persistence of neo-colonial rule. And despite of their effort and the fact that it was impossible to remain neutral in the East-West conflict, their position was quite clear in the face of imperialism. I don't have time to express all the elements I have in my paper regarding international cooperation, South-South cooperation, and even recently the debate that happened in Brazil with also the issue of the high-level committee on South-South cooperation. But I just want to end with 2-3 things. First, the advent and progress of BRICS is likely to revolutionize South-South cooperation as well as our living condition and perhaps revise the architecture of international regulation if the South is united and if its people ensure that the elite of the country leading this grouping do not reinvigorate capitalism. It is up to us at this very exceptional moment when imperialism is being redeployed to contribute to complete all the effort that were made by the past generation. We need to repoliticize our societies that were depoliticized during the neoliberal era, particularly for the youth. We, the people who were not founded on the basis of accumulation, profit, and the ownership of nature and people, and who have instead been the victim, should articulate a different conception of development that I call dynamic balance. Probably some of you have not heard of the Bamako Declaration and its principles. There are 8 principles. You can look at it on the internet. But I think even though it was in 2005 and 2006, principles are still accurate as the principle of Bandung. First is building a world on solidarity between human beings and peoples, building a world based on the full affirmation of citizen and gender equality, building a universal civilization in which diversity in all fields is given its full creative potential, building socialization through democracy. Neoliberal policies seek to impose a single mode of socialization, building a world based on the recognition of the non-market status of nature, the planet's resources, and agricultural land, building a world based on the recognition of the non-market status of cultural products and scientific knowledge, education, and health, promote policies that closely link democratization without predefined limits, and affirming the solidarity of the people of the North and the South in the construction of an internationalism and an anti-imperialist spaces. Like I have expressed it already in Bandung, the challenge of an anti-systemic response based on the spirit of Bandung should consider the feminist, ecological, and progressive challenge at the heart of the analysis aimed at democratically repoliticizing peoples with a view to an upsurge in the defense of the commons and an alternative to capitalism. It presupposes a critique of the development as a Eurocentric belief and a non-culturalist emphasis on the validation of other functional epistemes in order to build a universalism of people. Whereas over these last decades, national sovereign space have been considerably destabilized by arbitrary, unjust practices and the authority of big financial institutions, whether public or private. Whereas war, even a global war, is the choice implemented by the senile troika to reproduce their world order that is globally rejected by the wide majority of world population. Whereas the negative socio-political and ecological consequences of these measures will take decades to stamp out in our country. Whereas the regulatory mechanism that exists globally, whether multilateral or otherwise, to protect the commons have become archaic or inoperable, whereas meeting of agglomerated coalition like the World Social Forum, through important, make it difficult to carry out unstructured anti-imperialist work, and whereas the era of the West-East bipolarization of the world has taken different shape, mainly targeting Russia and China, and that of North-South persists like imperialism, but in more sophisticated form. And when also the scattering of state of the South has exhausted the potential of the group of the 77, Given all this substantial gain in the left in Latin America, the brakes that have been placed on the uprising in North Africa, the breakthrough in the Sahelian states, the spread of populist and far-right values, but also the disarray of the left and the great need for a democratic repoliticization, it is important to build on the historical struggle that have been fought and to more broadly work on others in order to translate the genuine credential of our people. So the development of a tricontinental internationalist political platform of convergence is very crucial. That's what I call Bandung Second, the new era of the aligned movement. An aligned movement against imperialism will be a second decisive step towards affirming democratic and popular sovereignty. Here, it will be important to firmly complete the gains of the preceding era and affirming an alignment with nation-state, popular movement, social groups, political parties, associations, individuals on the basis of internationalism in this specific condition. Bandung Second will provide a roadmap for a societal project in a polycentric world where popular forces of the South, fed up with the North-South monologue, are proposing to reorient globalization toward a development that is truly about balance, social justice, protecting Mother Earth's well-being, proper conduct, and attitude. Faced with the redeployment of imperialism, the resilience and response of the progressive global South and of internationalists remain scattered. The irreversible depletion of the ecosystem and the threat to human reproduction are amplifying the culturalist withdrawal and the resurgence of populist and fascist expression. This Capitalocene is bogged down in crisis and is on the way to depleting humanity. That's why I will end up with this sentence of our dear comrade Samir Amin. In our time, given the destructive power at the disposal of the powers that be ecological and military destruction, there is a real risk denounced by Marx in his days that fighting will destroy all the opposing camps. The second path, on the other hand, requires a lucid and organized intervention of the internationalist front of workers and people. Thank you. Very tempting to try again, but basically what I have noticed first is that this issue of brain gain should oppose also on brain gain. And so it's a brain drain and a brain gain movement. But as I mentioned it earlier, there is no recognition of the contribution of the Global South in the general knowledge. And if we have this system of debunking how knowledge is built on the world system, and if we consider that all the youths have the right to move anywhere they want to be, at least in the Global South. If the North doesn't accept, we can allow circulation of knowledge, at least in the Global South, if we have another conception of morality, because this issue of morality is the issue of ethics. Normally, most of mankind have invented religions because, in fact, our ethics are weak. But if we accept that we can have a system of morality that is universal, that's why I was referring to understanding the origin and the homeomorphic examples of other conception of worldview elsewhere. If we can reconcile that, then we can build a new form of universalist system. And this is based on ethics and moral. But it needs to be the contribution also of the Global South. The idea of liberty, like you have not chosen to be born. So liberty, you there haven't chosen to die. Those are, freedom is something that is restricted. But idea of equality is something more interesting. So if we put this at the cornerstone of our struggle, if we put solidarity, we can achieve those type of those progress. Now it may sound very utopian for the youth And as Dr. Su have explained, those consensual 10 principles that was raised in Bandung in '55 seems mild compared to what we are facing today. Just for the issue of defending the commons, all the public goods, just the issue of defending the earth that is in danger. And you remember how it was during the pandemic, that where we really see that we were lacking morals and ethics in terms of defending global health. So basically what I'm just saying is that all those concepts are useless if we don't actually understand the progressive potential that is still lying into the spirit of this Bandung efforts. But that's why I was saying that it has lost its breath, and I'm calling for another stage, which I call Bandung Second, or transinternationalism, where we can reinvent and like it's a fresh page. I'm just coming from Argentina, and I was struck there that most of the elite are still considering themselves as Europeans, and they look with despite to the other Latin American. While in fact, if you remember when they were fighting against Britain for the Falkland, so-called Malwines, the whole South was with them. So instead of accepting the geographical but also historic grounding in the global South, they look themselves are one of the United States province. So this is where we have to re-educate, I think, our system of thought, and I trust the new generation, the young generation, accept to be planet citizens, and particularly accept their participation in a global South endeavor. And this is something that we can learn, like we Africans can learn from Sri Lanka, from Vietnam, from Brazil, and exchange knowledge. For example, we can defend biodiversity. In my region, for example, we have 3,000 plants. At least 600 have been already patented by multinationals like Pfizer and Coca-Cola, etc. Those are common goods that we need to defend, you know. So anyway, I think we have a great deal to learn. We have to learn from China. We have to learn from internationalists like Norman Bichun, who is a Canadian who went there during the Spanish War and then went to China. So those are the spirits that are still alive with the idea of ethics. And I do believe that we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We just need to know history and know exactly where we go. There is maybe no camino, you know, there is no way as such, but the horizon should not be closed for the new generation. And this is where we are very anxious with this new technology, that the youth don't necessarily have the capacity of recognizing what is left from right in the internet, for example, what is disinformation and information, what type of skills that you need to have to be able to be armed with science, because science is the only option, a progressive science with open mind and a critic understanding of reality and history. Well, yes, quickly on this global governance issue and on people-centric. As you know, the multilateral system is not working because those who built it no longer need it, as it was built as a reproduction system of the world capitalist system. The non-aligned movement actually led to the advent of the Group of 77 in a truncated multilateral system. And the response was international cooperation, which never reached the 0.7 of ODA. So the triad, United States and Japan mainly, and Europe, never really respect that. And their response was to create the G3, then the G5, then the G7, then the G8, and finally G20. The G20 is attempting to regulate the international order without having the authority to do so. Many civil societies are protesting. Civil societies, to show you how it's important to repoliticize our masses. civil societies organize an anti-imperialist people's court, like during the November 2024 G20 activity. It was called a Popular Anti-Imperialist Tribunal, which brought together thousands of people at the Fundación Progreso, which is a historic place in Rio de Janeiro, to judge 6 cases, among them Palestine, Haiti, the United States-Mercosur Agreement of crimes in the presence of those who affected lawyers and judges. So in fact, all the peoples and nations that have suffered colonization and continue to suffer its after effects must learn to work together to emerge from their condition. And this is why a people-centric approach is so important, to not leave the decision-making to leaders. There was a world summit, maybe you have witnessed, a world summit that was called by UN to see whether the leader of the world would be able to save mankind, and it was a failure. So it is important that citizens, not consumers, but citizens with consciousness, like understanding what is the gravity of the situation and the emergency. And this is why the anti-systemic zone, which is this global south, have a privilege to express this capacity of South-South cooperation at all levels, bilateral, multilateral, or simply as citizens. And this is why we should never, never underestimate the scope and the magnitude of any of our contribution, like even the tiny, tiny person, like the drop of rain or any drop in the sea. All people are important. And even though it is not considered as important people in the global north, you can see when we have casualties in Palestine or, people dying in the global south, no one really pay attention. I'm not mentioning Africa. But we know that we are all important. And once we understand that, and that united we can really confront the system, once we realize that, I think it's almost impossible to stop the tide. And because they know exactly the power of the people. When people unite, imperialism trembles.